All right, in this short demo, we're going to show you how to build a Kubeflow pipeline using the KFP SDK for Kaggle's Bluebook for Bulldozers competition. The first thing to do is to have Kubeflow deployed. In this case, I've deployed it using Kubeflow as a service. I'm going to launch a notebook server by giving it a name. I'm going to bump up the CPUs to 2, and I'm going to bump up the RAM to 2 gigabytes. Click the launch button. And once my notebook server is up and running, I should be able to connect to it. And once connected to it, I'm going to want to open up a terminal. And from within this terminal, what I want to do now is download the Kubeflow/examples repository. And inside of that repository is going to be our Bulldozers project. Next up, you want to create a Docker Hub account if you haven't done already. You're also going to want to install Docker locally on your desktop. In this case, I will install it on Mac. And then once it's installed, you want to make sure that you have the Docker app up and running. And for good measure, you're going to also want to log in at the command line using the Docker client. And once connected, you want to hop over now to Kaggle and create an account if you don't already have one. And once you want to go to the account page and generate an API token. And here, when you do this, you're going to get a kaggle.json file, and that file is going to have your username as well as your API token that you're going to need to create a Kubernetes secret. So we're going to use the Kaggle create secret command by subbing in our username as well as our API token. Once that's done, we want to come back locally, verify that we've got Git installed locally, and now we want to clone the Kubeflow/examples repository locally as well. So now we have it up on KFast, but we also have it locally as our development environment. Next up, let's create a resource.yaml file. So let's create a blank file, cut and paste the appropriate contents there, save it out as a resource.yaml file. And once that's done, we're going to want to use this to create a pod default resource. So we'll hop back over to the command line and we'll use the command that you see here to create that pod default. So with that done, we're ready to now hop on over to our local development environment. You can see we already downloaded the Bluebook for Bulldozers project. We're going to navigate into the pipeline components directory, then navigate into the load data directory. You'll see 2 files here, Docker file as well as load.py. If you look at the load.py file, this is the file that we're going to use to create our load component, which turns into our pipeline step. So here locally, we're going to want to navigate at the command line into the load data directory. You can see our Docker file and load.py file is there. Here we're going to want to use Docker build to actually build our Docker image off that py file. And then now we're going to want to actually push it up to Docker Hub using the Docker push command. And once that completes, if we head back over to Docker Hub, refresh our repositories view, you'll see that our load Docker image is there. So we're going to rinse and repeat this on a few of these steps. So now let's head on over to the preprocess directory. Open up the preprocess.py file. This is the file that we're going to use to create our pipeline component, our pipeline step. Navigate into the preprocess directory locally. And then from here, again, we're going to want to use the Docker build command to build our Docker image off of that py file. Once that's done, we want to then use Docker push to push that image up onto Docker Hub. And once completed, we can head back over to Docker Hub, refresh our repositories view, and you can see the preprocess image is there. Next up, let's navigate into the test directory locally here. Again, 2 files, Docker file as well as test.py. You can see this is the file that we're going to use to create our Docker image. We'll use the Docker build command again to create our Docker image. Then we'll use the Docker push command to push this image up onto Docker Hub. And with that complete, we head back over to Docker Hub, refresh, and you can see that our train Docker image is there. So let's do our final one, which is going to be the test component. So let's go into that directory. You can see here's the py file that we're going to use to create our Docker image. Let's go ahead and use the Docker build command. Our image is built. We're now ready to go ahead and push that image up to Docker Hub. Once we get confirmation, we can head back over to Docker Hub and refresh the repositories view. And you can now see all 4 of our components or pipeline steps are there. So now let's head back over to Kubeflow as a service and open up the .py file. And here we're going to want to sub in the appropriate image names as well as our Docker Hub username versus the defaults that are there. So once we've gone ahead and updated or substituted in that information, we're ready to now head back locally, delete the .yaml file that's there because we want to actually create a new one up on Kubeflow as a service, and we're going to do that by using Python 3 and then the name of that .py file that we just updated with the correct username and image names. Now we're ready to go ahead and download that .yaml file we created, and you can see it's now in our local directory. And with it there, we're ready to go ahead and run this pipeline. The first thing to do is to create a new experiment. So here I'm in the Kubeflow UI experiments view. I name it. In this case, I named it Bulldozers 88. And after that, we're ready to go ahead and create a pipeline. And we're going to upload that YAML file, right, that was local, upload that file. And then we want to create that pipeline. And then now that the pipeline is created, we're ready to create a run. All we have to do is assign it to the experiment that we created, which was Bulldozer 88. Click the Start button, and now we have an experiment, a pipeline, and a run. Let's click on the run because it is actually running. And here we're going to end up in the runtime execution graph. You can see we've created a volume, we've loaded our data, we've pre-processed our data. We're now training our data, and then we wrap it up with the final test data step. And that's it. Our pipeline has successfully executed, and you can click on the individual steps in the pipeline to get input, output visualizations, metadata, as well as log information. You can see here in our test step the final output, as well as the ability to see a simplified as well as a more complex runtime execution graph. And that's it. You've successfully created a Kubeflow pipeline using the KFP SDK for Kaggle's Bluebook for Bulldozers competition.